What's going on, golf addicts? Welcome to another edition of the Tour Junkies podcast. We got a great interview today from our friend Rufus Peabody. The dude is a legend. He's a professional gambler, very different from the people that you hear on our shows week in, week out. Loves betting on golf. In fact, I saw a tweet recently from Rufus. I love golf an irrational amount. I would be very happy playing all day, every day. And that is the definition of the Tour Junkies. That's why we call them golf addicts. We love it. He is the founder of Unabated.com, which is data tools for sports betting. I haven't seen any golf on there yet, Rufus. So I want to ask you about that. Also, the host of the Bet the Process podcast, and actually a damn good golfer. You know, Rufus, I got to say, we find a lot of these, these golf bettors and maybe the data nerds, if you will, and they've never played golf, or if they pick up a club,
What?
they suck. But you're like a 7 handicap, right? And welcome to the show.
Thanks. I mean, I don't think I'm a very good golfer, but I actually I've been playing almost every day the last month and a half, and I'm down to a 4.6.
What?
Wow.
Just the last 10 days, I broke 85 times.
Dude, you got to stop putting in some of those scores, brother. We'll have you up here for a member guest or something. Get that handicap up a little bit. That's awesome.
I shot 88 yesterday, so
Oh yeah, well it happens. Congratulations.
coming back down to earth.
That's killer. So Rufus, I want to get right into it. We got a bunch of questions. I guess first off, like establishing for the listener who may not know or know you, like I have heard rumors of some of your betting tales. I've heard that you can confirm or deny some of these. I've heard that on a maybe Masters week you have somewhere between $1 million or 1.5 million in play betting on the Masters. Obviously, you were just kind of got some airtime for your Mito Pereira $500 ticket at like 300 to 1 for the PGA Championship. But I guess for the person who doesn't know you, like try to establish a little bit about why you've pivoted recently to strictly betting on golf, and then at a high level, like what your week looks like betting on golf.
Well, I still bet on football.
Oh, you
But
do? Okay.
yes, but I'm spending most of my time on the betting side on golf. Just golf's year round. It's my biggest edge. And so, yeah, I've been doing this for a living since 2009, betting on sports, and golf has generally been the biggest edge for me over that time period. And, as markets become more efficient, it sort of makes more sense to specialize more and more. It's just hard to do like 4 different sports well enough to beat a more mature market.
Yep. So is the Masters rumor true that I just said? Is that how much you had in play for Masters?
North of that, actually.
North of that. Jeez. How much do you have in play on a regular week? Regular colonial week? Charles Schwab
I mean,
week?
this year it's been a little bit less. It all depends on what value I can find. But I would say on a normal week, probably between PGA and European Tour in the 500 to 700,000 range.
Gotcha.
And majors are in the 1.5 to 2 million typically.
Love it. God, that's awesome. All right. So at a high level, though, tell me, what does your week look like in terms of betting on golf? So starting on Monday, like a high level, and we're going to get into the nitty gritty details of some of this stuff.
Okay.
But high level, the new golf tournament begins on, golf week begins on Monday. So through, first ball in the air on Thursday, and then live opportunities, the end of a golf tournament. Like what are you doing? What's your process?
So the modeling has basically been done ahead of time. And so when the golf tournament the previous week ends on Sunday, once the data is, final and everything, I'm pulling that data and then I'm essentially ingesting it into my computer and running a bunch of code to update golfer rankings and, and various things, situational effects, things like that. And I'm generally hoping to crank out my initial numbers Sunday night if I can. And then so Monday morning, my brother, who kind of runs the trading side for me, is able to sort of send out sort of these high priority bets to our betting partners. So we'll hit outrights early because those tend to, I mean, they're smaller markets overall, but there's some good prices available early on outrights typically. And then, when matchups come out, we'll bet those. We're trying not to, there's this balance between between edge, I guess, and volume. You bet something earlier when the market's less mature, you're not going to get as much down, but you're going to get it at a larger edge typically.
Yep.
And so a lot of it, there is some sort of art to it, and knowing how knowing what is and isn't going to influence the market. And so let's see. I mean, the big books come out with matchups. Like the market gets a lot more mature on Tuesday after like Bookmaker comes out with their matchups, which kind of shapes the market. Round one stuff comes out Tuesday evening typically. We're looking for opportunities. We're sending things to betting partners, and after each round, it's kind of the same thing. Like run simulations, look for value, bet.
Are you, from round to round, is the live betting being done at the end of the round, or is it happening in the middle, or both, or it just depends on the opportunity?
I'm not betting during the round at all. No,
Yeah.
just after the round.
And you probably watch golf too, right? I'm sure that's part of the process.
I do. I don't need to, but I mean, I enjoy watching golf. That's
Sure.
And if I can call it work, then that's a huge win, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Has there been any sports books that have banned you or limited you so far?
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the business, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, so for let's talk about like a beginner intermediate golf. I want early on for people in this interview to like feel like they can start taking things away from you. So how should a beginner intermediate golfer approach a betting card for a normal week, right? In terms of and I know this is dynamic. That's a key word in all this, that it's dynamic, and it obviously depends on different situations, but in general, do you think there's a rule of thumb for things like percentage of their bankroll, or how many units they should be trying to win and bet from week to week, or what percentage of? I'd also love to hear more about like your recommendation maybe to a beginner intermediate golf bettor on how their total exposure should be broken down between outrights and other finish position bets and matchups and things like that. So maybe talk to me about like if you had an intermediate level golf bettor sitting here looking at you wanting that kind of advice, what would you tell them?
Well, I don't think there's one way to do things. I think what has always worked for me is to kind of scale things up like slowly. I'm not going balls to the wall on something until until I get more comfortable with it. And so you develop a feel for things as well the more you do it. So I would say don't bet more than you can afford to lose, obviously, and you're gonna be a better bettor than you are later. I mean, than you are now later.
Yeah.
So. The other big recommendation I'd say is to bet into lower hold markets where you can. So, and price shop. Price shopping is huge, but outright markets typically the hold on most books is between like 25 and 40%, sometimes even higher actually. And so if you're just if you're going to lose your money a lot more quickly betting outrights typically. Whereas if you're betting into a matchup market, a lot of the time if it's -110, that's only 4.5% right there. So you have less of a barrier or to profitability. I mean, I guess it's easier to overcome 4.5% than it is to overcome 30%. So that said, there's times, I mean, there's with the US books, there's a lot of times that books will have like one book might have a number that's very different than other books on these outrights. So you can, I guess, what they say is reduce your synthetic hold. Like if you looked at the best price available on each golfer, it's going to be a much lower hold market. And so like price shopping, if you're gonna bet outrights, make sure you have multiple books to choose from and pick the best price.
For the beginning golf bettors, can you just briefly explain what hold percent is and why a hold percent of 25% is significant from say 40%?
So with outrights, if you added up all the probabilities associated with the odds on each golfer, it would add up to 125 to 140%. So basically the book is expecting to make 25 to 40% from each bet. So, whereas a market -110, the book's only expecting to make 4.76%. That's the hold there. So just because if you sort of sum those the probabilities associated with the odds and then 1 divided by that,
Do you do that same calculation for say, top 10, top 20s, head to heads? and all the other bets outside of outrights?
Which calculation? I mean, can you for the hold in a market?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you add it, so for top five, let's say if there's dead heat rules, which means that ties reduce. So if two guys tied for fifth, you would only get, the bet would be half of a win and half of a loss if you had a top five. So in that case, there are five winning entities, I guess, winning golfers. And so in that case, if you summed up all the probabilities associated with the odds and divided that by five, that would be, that's the over round there. And so I'll say this though, I find that there's much less value on outrights. I mean, in a lot of these sort of books with higher hold, I'm just not going to find as many. I'm not going to find as many bets as I will on something like matchups, just as a percentage of what's available. So
gotcha. Would you say matchups is probably what makes up the majority of your exposure on a week-to-week basis?
Yeah, and that's largely too because I can get a lot more down on matchups. It's just a bigger market.
Yeah. What and are you more of a tournament matchups, round by round, both?
So tournament matchups are definitely bigger for me. I think the problem is that I tend to shape the market a good amount in tournament matchups, and so it's a lot easier to price round one matchups if you already know what the tournament matchup prices are, and that's kind of how it goes. And so there aren't as many opportunities in round matchups, but I still do find them here and there.
If you have a like, let's just use a hypothetical example. Let's say like your model or simulation is saying golfer A is minus 140 over golfer B, but the sports book has them at, say, even money. Do you just keep firing at them till they get to like 130, or do you just fire it once and then just see how the book reacts, or how do you handle that?
Well, so there's different types of books, like the books like DraftKings and FanDuel, these recreational books. They're going to take that bet and they might not even move the line, but they won't let you bet again. Mm-hmm. And so they're not a true market making book, but market making books like Pinnacle, like BetChris, even like Bet Online. If you they'll move it and then you could fire again. And so it depends on how much they moved it, but I'll bet something down to about a 4% edge typically. So if I could, I would keep firing on it generally.
Gotcha.
But the other thing is if the market as a whole is even money, I could bet it at different books as well. And then see what the market does. And then, I want to get down as much as I can at the best price.
Now, Rufus, you do DFS too, right? You play golf DFS somewhat, right?
I did a little bit. I don't really anymore.
Yeah. Did you ever thinking through, would you use books like some of these market making books, like you're talking about Pinnacle, BetChris? Would you use those head-to-head matchups to help maybe identify potential edges in DFS in terms of like you see a head-to-head on a guy that makes a lot more sense for one player who's maybe a lower owned possible pivot? Did you ever do that, or do you recommend that, or how would you? Is there a way that you leverage those market making books in DFS?
I think that if you're not modeling stuff yourself, then that's a good way of doing it. And I think that's kind of something that the DFS world caught on to. Yeah. For me, I'm just using my own stuff, but by the time the tournament starts, generally I'm not finding any value on tournament matchups anywhere. So yeah. I'm able to bet things pretty much into shape. And so that's, but I think that's also going to be reflected in ownership too. And so I think DFS is largely about reacting to what other people are doing and trying to stay a step ahead, just because, if ownership seems to be too much keyed on what these market making books are at. I mean, you can find spots where, this guy might be low owned and maybe you're giving up a little bit of equity there, but it's going to be beneficial just because you're you get leverage there.
Yeah.
At least if we're talking about sort of the GPPs.
Right. What would be some of the biggest mistakes that you would see golf bettors make on a consistent basis, or what would you warn somebody against week to week?
I mean, golf bettors bettors in general, I would say, don't chase your losses. Don't bet more than you can afford to lose. Have as many outs as you can, as many places to bet, just so you can price shop. so you can get the best price. Because you might think that like the difference between minus 115 and minus 120 is small. If you have a $10 bet on something, you're like, well, that's, so what? I don't care about I don't care about if it's going to be like, I don't care about 20 cents or whatever. I don't know how much it actually is, but it does add up over time. And I mean, I literally went back last year and I was like, well, what, how much is, if I bet everything at 2 cents worse, like that would have been like 6 figures, right? Like, so I think, I mean, it's just, because you're just, it compounds.
What about, so we've talked a little bit about like the percentage of your bankroll week to week. It primarily ties up in head-to-head matchups. You maybe grab a few early outright values that you find on a Monday or something. But what about, talk to me about the finished position bets. Like, are you doing top 5 bets on anybody that you have an outright on? Are you doing top 20s, first round leaders? Like what about those bets?
I don't think I've ever found more than like 2% of value ever on a first round leader bet. Like the first round leader market, I would say don't bet into that. And that seems to be a popular market that people like, for people are like, well, I mean, it seems like people give out picks in first round leaders a lot, but I think that market, there's a high hold, and it's fairly easy to price. So I advise not betting into that market. You're going to have better opportunities betting into just the win markets. But, yes, I do bet into finished position markets, mostly in the United States. Also, I have access to, I have betting partners in Europe. And so I can bet. I don't know if you're familiar with each ways, which are, half of the bet is to win and half of it is to place, and then like, for example, place might pay the top 6 at 1/5 the odds of the win price. So, that's kind of nice because I like that those reduce your variance too. It's not all or nothing, and there can be value sometimes, especially with underdogs, because with each ways everybody gets cut by, like, everybody's odds get cut by the same fraction. So if you think about, like, let's go an extreme example. Let's say someone's 1,000 to 1. For them to be top 6 now is 200 to 1. But it's not there. If you look at, like, when they finish top 5, it is going to be an extreme, like, tail. It's a huge outlier, and they are disproportionately more likely to be, 6th place than 5th place than 4th place. It's going to fall down really, really quick. I mean, they're probably going to be 20x more likely to get 6th place than to get like 2nd place. And so there can be some value in underdogs there just because of the place equity. Even if there can be you can have a negative EV bet on the win part of it, but the value on the place bet can make up for that. So, the U.S. markets, there are some, I can get down at some top X stuff with some betting partners, but I will say, like, do I bet the top X stuff if I have value on an outright? It all depends on the price I'm getting. So, typically, if I have value on an outright, I might have value on a top 5, but it's not always that way.
Yeah, I guess I was asking that as, like, that's probably not exactly the same thing as the each way, but it feels like a workaround in the U.S. to have like your outright and then bet the same guy top 5. But you don't get like top 6 or top 8 options either.
You get the top 20 bets though. I mean, anything where I could, like, I love stuff like that if I can reduce variance a bit too.
Yeah.
And you made a good point too. And I know we talk about it on the podcast quite a bit as well. Like, any golfer in the field can be a great bet at a certain number. Any golfer in the field can be a terrible bet at a certain number. And I think a lot of times, especially for beginners, they'll kind of lock on to someone and like the number is almost irrelevant to them. Whereas, I mean, it could be anyone, but they could be a great bet at 80 to 1 and an absolutely terrible bet at 50 to 1. And just making that distinction and not really caring about the player per se, and really only caring about the number.
Right. I mean, like, I bet Mito Pereira at 300 to 1, which is a fantastic price, and that was not available for very long. That was Monday morning. Yeah. And some people were like, oh, look, I got, we're like, I went through that too. I got him at 170 to 1 or something like that. And I'm like, well, I only made him 200. I made him 210 to 1. So 301 was a really, really nice edge, but he closed 100 and something to 1. And I actually was lower on him than a lot of the analytics crowd. So it's,
yeah, that's a really, really nice example.
Are you, let me, before Ben gets to the next question, are you going to, I meant to ask you that earlier. Are you making your own numbers on these guys before you open up the first line at a book, or is that what your systems are doing for you?
Yeah. So my approach, I probably should have said this before. I run simulations. So I have projections for the, I generate like round level projections for golfers, which actually is, I do stuff at the whole level and then you build that up to the round level, but I'm simulating at the round level. So I'll run, I think on a given week, I do anywhere from like 200 to 300,000 simulations of a tournament, depending on the field size and how motivated I feel. Actually, it's just about running code, but then, so after each round, it sort of updates the golfer's skill and so, you go through the 4 rounds of the tournament. And basically from those simulations, those Monte Carlo simulations, I can price out basically, almost any type of bet. I mean, not like hole-in-one stuff, but
yeah, wow.
But all the major markets.
That's sick.
When you get down to like round level and hole by hole stuff, do you take into account like a player's preferred ball flight, or if they're a lefty or righty? Like Augusta would be probably the easiest example of, it always favors kind of a right to left ball flight. Do you ever take any of that into consideration?
No, not explicitly. That's something I wish I had better data on that. It's more of a data issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think there is something to that, like in course fit. I mean, like, or just think about someone like Bubba. Like, he's lefty. I mean, he's a lefty. His ball flight fits Augusta. He likes moving the ball around. But there's certain courses for him where he just feels more comfortable too. Like, he doesn't like courses that feel claustrophobic. He likes ones where he feels like he can be creative. I mean, he's really good at like River Highlands and like Riviera. But yeah, so I mean, I think that there clearly is a comfort, and I think that clearly ball flight does matter in terms of course fit, but it's something that I haven't really delved too deep into yet, just because I don't have great data on it. I mean, it's I need someone following every player around and like looking at the man stuff.
Understood. Is there anything that you found in your testing or simulations that was either really surprising to you or something that you felt confident it was one way, and then after you tested it, you're like, damn, that's the exact opposite of what I expected to find?
It's a tough question, putting me on the spot. I feel like there have been a lot of those things over the years, but I can't really think of one off the top of my head right now.
Okay. We can circle back if you think of it. Because I know, and some of the stuff I've done, not with golf betting, but with trading and building automated systems, it's amazing to me how I'll go in with a theory and it kind of doesn't test great, and then I flip the theory exactly backwards and it magically works and has an edge. So I was just curious if you had found anything like that in golf and or just betting in general.
Well, I'll say one thing that, like, you're working with, I mean, yes, you have a lot of data, but at the same time, it's easy to be like, you can be fooled by randomness. I mean, you're going to find lots of things that look like they have very significant effects. I mean, like, for example, Southern Hills in 2007 played very much as a course where like really, really good approach play or approach players overperformed. And I kind of said, and I think the narrative is the second shot golf course. And I personally don't think there's a such thing as a second shot golf course. And from everything I've found, here's something actually. For everything I found, there isn't really any consistent predictive power to how much someone's like strokes gained approach actually is going to matter on a course. It matters. It matters more insofar as other things can matter less. Gotcha. And you can say that like short iron play matters more or long iron play matters more. So like Jason Kokrak's a great example of a guy that is a really, really good long iron player, and he gains a lot on relative to an average PGA Tour pro on long irons, but not really on wedges or short irons. Whereas that's someone like JT is a great wedge player, and so
maybe you can help settle a debate that David and I have been, and Pat has been having for probably the last 2 years or so. Is I mean, it's not like a big consideration, but it's something I'll look at and make it a small percentage of consideration every week, is proximity from certain distance buckets and how someone ranks in the field compared to that. And do you think that has any predictive edge to it, or is that just random noise and you're digging too deep?
I don't think so. I think in a way you're not digging deep enough if you want to use proximity, because you don't know where, we don't have data like Matthew Fitzpatrick has with every single shot since he was 15 years old and where he was aiming. If you knew where someone was aiming, that's the thing. And so, especially with like runoff areas, you could hit a shot that looks like it's, that was very close to being a really, really good shot, really close, and ends up being, 50 feet away. Whereas another guy plays a safe shot to 25 feet and, like the guy. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it's sort of the risk reward thing too. And so not knowing where guys are aiming is tough. So, I mean, I will say I've done some stuff myself, like categorizing approaches into sort of buckets based on proximity and sort of looking at the value of that, just to sort of see how much, your typical like strokes gained approach stuff over or undervalues that in terms of its predictive value. So for example, let's say a guy makes a hole in one on a course that's averaging, let's say a par 3, averaging 3.2 strokes. So he gained 2.2 strokes on that approach. If he'd hit it to an inch, he gains 1.2 strokes. Is there any skill in actually getting it there? I mean, and I think, what was it, like Tiger's best, like during the peak of Tiger's career, he was last on the PGA Tour in hole outs or something like that. So, I mean, there really is, I don't think there's much to, I think Spieth fans might disagree, but like, looking at the hole out shot. So, I mean, it's a lot of it for me is finding things where, trying to sort of take out the luck. But I do think the proximity stuff, if we had more information on it, like I think, I think it could add value if you put it in context. But I think just looking at proximity overall is gonna, I don't think we'll have that much value personally.
So Rufus, just to clear this up, Rufus has sided with me, and I'm grateful for that. I'm appreciative of this. Thank you, Rufus. And also, we didn't even talk about the fact that, if it says if the bucket is 175 to 200 and it's a 174 shot, right? Then it goes in another bucket, which is dumb. Or we don't know either, because we all play golf. It could be 155 to the hole, but based on wind, based on elevation, based on adrenaline pumping, whatever it is, you may not be trying to hit it 155. So we don't know all these things, right? And so Rufus, I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, and the buckets are you're arbitrarily defining buckets. I mean, I think it's an easy way to look at things, because rather than saying, oh, this guy like gets, here's his sort of yardage slope factor for how he gets better or worse with but I do think I mean, that part is tough though, because you also have guys that are more comfortable with certain distances, like he's like because a certain distance may be a stock shot in other distances between clubs. But really quickly, back to what I had said about like approach not really mattering. It's not that approach doesn't matter on a course, like it's just that it doesn't matter. I found that it doesn't have more predictive value at one course than another in terms of globally.
So let's sit here for a second, because this is really interesting, especially because like us and every other podcast, YouTube channel, whatever, strokes gained approach is the
I know. I love everybody always talks about that.
So how do you, but if that has all these errors and the proximity has all these errors, then how are you quantifying that Jason Kokrak is a good long iron player and Justin Thomas is a good wedge player. How do you get to that? How do you
I
arrive?
am using strokes. So I have my own strokes gained at the shot level I build. Just be using sort of those, the XY, all the shot length data. And so I'm able to, essentially using that, I'm able to do that. But I'm not saying it doesn't have value. I'm just,
You're not
it
saying
does have value, but it certainly doesn't have the same value that off the tee stuff does.
Okay, so then rank just in general, the strokes gained metrics that you think have the most predictive value. You would say, it sounds like, off the tee, then approach.
I'm not sure between approach and around the green. I think putting is last, but they all matter. But it's like, it depends on what time horizon I was looking at to evaluate a player. There's certain things that stabilize quicker than others. Like putting takes a lot longer to stabilize, for example, than, you're not going to fake hitting the ball 350 yards unless you hit a cart path.
Yeah.
So,
and you can make kind of the same argument with around the green too, kind of like what you just made with proximity and approach, is that, I mean, at least to me, in my personal golf experience, I mean, a lot of that is kind of like lie dependent, and did you short side yourself and all that kind of stuff can have a big impact on, what your end of the day strokes gain number is around the green compared to just, looking at it shot by shot.
That's a really good point. And I think that's an area, that's why I think strokes gain off the tee matters like so much. It's because we're able to measure it really well. Like, everybody's starting at the same place. Whereas of course, it doesn't always know that if you miss right on this hole, that's way worse than missing left or being a yard off the fairway in the primary rough is, you're getting penalized, but it was very close to being a very, really good drive if the right side was favored. But yeah, on approaches, like, there's certain, you could have a really bad lie and absolutely nothing you can do with the ball. And like, it's not a bad, well, maybe and you're getting essentially docked for that shot, but there really wasn't much you can do. So I think that's part of the issue there, especially with that and around the green, and even with putting to some extent too. I mean, what was your leave? I mean, what, like, if you're let's say 16 at Augusta or something with the if you're, let's say the Sunday pin, the typical Sunday pin, if you leave it, what's that, front left, back left? I mean, I don't know if it's considered front or back left because it's further back, but it's like, but if let's say you missed in the northeast quadrant or something, you're probably not going to have anything inside of 8-10 feet, right?
All right, golf addicts, we're going to get right back to the show here in just a second. But before we do, I want to remind you to subscribe to the emails that we send free and weekly every Tuesday, every Wednesday. On Tuesday, we hit you with the heavy petting email. It's foreplay for golf bettors and DFS lovers, okay? And in the heavy petting email, we're going to give you some nuggets, some things you need to remember about the golf course, about that tournament, some things we've not covered in the podcast just yet, but key reminders when it comes to Tuesday, starting to whittle down your player pool. That's going to be in that email. The 10 facts, the famous 10 facts. If you've been following us for 5 or 6 years, you've seen them on our website. Now they're only in the heavy petting email. That hits on Tuesday. You're going to want to check that out. And my prize picks play of Thursday of round 1. Pat puts out his prize picks plays in the Fantasy Golf Sommelier video. I drop my favorite Thursday play in the heavy petting email. Then on Wednesday is the famous chalk bomb email where we go over the weather and we discuss, are there weather advantages? Are there not? We go over 3 head-to-head matchups that catch our eye. And even if you don't bet head-to-head matchups, really what we're looking at is, do they say anything about DFS? Do they tell us anything about what the sports bettors that bet head-to-heads, which are usually sharper players, what they're thinking about certain players? And can we learn anything? Can we pivot with ownership in GPPs, et cetera? Those head-to-head matchup write-ups are key. And then, of course, the chalk bomb, the most bold piece of content in the DFS streets, where we take one of the more popular projected players. They have to be projected at 15% or more, and we tell you why we think you should consider avoiding them. These are 2 free emails. That's all it is. All you got to do is go to tourjunkies.com/chalkbomb, or the link is in the description below. Subscribe for free, and you get both emails delivered to your inbox, one every Tuesday, one every Wednesday, and it's great free content straight to your inbox. Check it out. Subscribe below. Now let's get back to the show. So speaking of putting, how do you you just said putting is the lowest in terms of predictive value in terms of just the strokes gained stats. How do you weight putting yourself, and in terms of the variance, and do you evaluate things like the surface that you're on, whether it's bent, Bermuda, whatever, the speeds of those greens typically, or short term, long term putting? Like, talk to me about just in general, what does Rufus think about the putting
Putting.
stats and variance? Yeah.
So first off, I build out sort of like, it isn't just short term, long term. It's like there's sort of a decay rate that I found for each of these different things. And so, I mean, I think you could say that putting is something that, short term fluctuations in performance don't have as much predictive value as in other areas. In terms of grass type, I've certainly looked at that. You have guys like Keith Mitchell when he won. Where did he win?
Honda.
A few years ago. Honda, right? Where he talked about how much more comfortable he was on Bermuda, and I'm like, well, but when I look at it, I can't find anything about guys. Like I have a thing I look at how much a guy's overperformed in different areas. Like how many strokes has this guy overperformed putting on Bermuda greens, and how much would I predict he's going to overperform in the future on them, based on that and stuff like that. And in some areas, there's, you can find some small effects, but it's pretty marginal, to be honest. I think it's a good narrative, but I'm sure there are, but then again, like maybe it may just be that I'm not looking at it in I don't want to say the right way, but in a way that but yes, the right way, because I can't. So knowing, like, if I knew that Keith Mitchell grew up playing Bermuda greens, like if I added that, it's probably going to be better. But there could be a guy that overperformed putting on Bermuda greens who is not even a good, like who just happened to be, it's just variance. He got lucky. He putted better than normal those weeks and had nothing to do with the fact that they're Bermuda. So, I think I do think that there is value to sort of that qualitative information. It's just harder to it's harder to put a value and quantify it.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of players like Kevin Kisner is a perfect example, and he's been on the podcast several times talking about how much he hates POA greens, and he never wants to play on them. But then you pull his player card up, and his strokes gained on POA is like identical to Bermuda, identical to bent.
Well, here's the thing. Everybody's playing on it too. He's like, it's bumpy. You get all these bad breaks. Everybody gets bad breaks.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
I want to talk about, first of all, like Rufus is about to shorten up all the Tour Junkies content because we're slowly eliminating every stat we talk about. So our shows are going to get a lot shorter. We're just going to be like, yeah, we like this guy. Hell if we know why, but we like this guy. Okay, let me ask you this. A big thing is course history. I heard you on Establish the Run with Adam Levitan talk about course history. We tend to believe that course history matters. There are other people in the space that think it doesn't. We tend to believe that it does matter. To how much, we're not sure. Obviously, it varies by course and by player, conditions, all that kind of stuff. But how do you take it into account? And another question that I know, like Ben and I like to look at sometimes is like, rather than course history, sometimes you may look at how did a player perform like tee to green, and maybe it's greens and reg, or it's ball striking off the tee and approach on that course. Do you think that's more predictive? Talk to us about course history.
Yeah, so I actually do look at course history for the different stat types, for the different, like, whatever you call them, categories.
Okay.
So putting versus off the tee approach around the green. Course history, I think, like, clearly does matter. And I think you're right with what you said about how it matters more for certain courses than other courses. And I think you could probably, as a general rule, say the more unique a course is, the more course history is going to matter.
Yeah.
The more quirky it is. Yeah. But I think that course history is very distinct from course fit. So course history, I mean, if you think about it, if you were able to do course fit, the better you can do course fit and figure out what skills matter at a course, the less course history is going to matter, because you're going to eat up, like, I guess, most of what makes that course unique and what would make somebody good at it. So I think you want to make sure you don't double count, I guess. You want to see how, like, because I look at how a player did relative to expectation. for that course, though, based on how that course fits his skills. So when you do that, it's probably going to matter a little bit less. But clearly, I mean, for me, I think it picks up on things like, is a right to left ball flight preferred here? Things like that. So
what about so one thing that I don't really, I guess the word is believe in, and you've already made me feel better about my proximity belief. So if you want to shoot me down on this one, you can. I'm not a big correlated courses guy. So people who say, okay,
oh yeah,
man, this thing Colonial is it's like a harbor town because it's, it requires accuracy off the tee, precision, and you're hitting into these small greens. So look at leaderboards and performance from these from these years at this course to kind of help you mine value here at this week. Talk to me about correlated courses and your thoughts on that.
You said you're not a big believer in it.
I'm not
either. I've done.
I'm smarter than I thought I was.
I'm basically just telling you nothing matters. It seems like, right?
You kind of are. That's what I don't like about
I have delved deep into it. I think I did. It was I think I looked into it 10 years ago really in depth. That's how long I've been doing this.
10 years ago.
And tried to essentially come up with figure out how much to weight a guy's performance, essentially a multiplier, to say, okay, well, I know how much last week's worth relative to the other week, but what's the multiplier on this course for that course? So it was basically this big matrix that said, Riviera gets a weight of 1.2 to predict Muirfield Village or something like that. That's not actually what it said, but the thing is, what I found, and this was these were properly regressed to the mean and all that. It was what I found was that when I applied all this, I ended up the most it ever changed a guy's projection per round was 0.03 strokes.
So basically nothing.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Interesting.
I think if you're not doing course fit stuff, then it probably would matter more.
Yeah.
But because there certainly are similarities, but why not just go to the source and say, okay, their courses are similar because you need to be accurate off the tee. Well, then let's just look at the accuracy off the tee rather than how someone did this other course.
Right. So I'm assuming, how do you approach a course where we have no data on, whether it's a major course that Southern Hills is a great example. The last time they played it, it was almost a completely different golf course. So it was worthless to look at much else. Or if it's a new course, something like that. I'm assuming I'm guessing the answer is, yeah, I just don't look at it. I don't care. It's still going to come down to your course fit based on what you do know of the golf course, right?
I'd say I do quite well with new courses typically, because I guess there are things you can know about them before players actually tee it up.
Yeah.
And use the information. I don't want to say, I'm not going to go into detail, but I'm just going to say I use information that's available to me to figure out how I expect it to play.
Okay.
So when you're looking at course history specifically, you're just judging someone off of plus or minus what you expected of them going into it. You're not looking at any specific stat like GIRs gained or anything like that.
What gained?
Green regulation gained at a specific course.
No, I'm looking, but I'm seeing how many strokes they gained off the tee relative to what I would have expected for them based on their skill in that particular course, things like that. Gotcha. I'm not doing it for greens and regulation specifically, but that's sort of the approach. It's you need to control for how good the player was at that time, how they were playing at that time, rather than just saying, oh, this guy's won here a bunch, right? It's like in football, the notion that you hear the announcers always talk about home field advantage, and it's the Superdome always has great home field advantage when the Saints are good. They're always talking about that. That's the narrative, right? And then nobody's talking about if the Saints aren't good, their home field advantage. But it's yeah,
that's right. I know one theory that I've gone back and forth on a bunch of times is do you believe in good wind players?
Ooh, this is something I've looked into a lot too. And again, I wish I had better data too, in terms of the wind on every shot that was hit, versus if you just have the weather data I have, you have hourly observations. The problem with that is it's not like, I think gusts are the thing that I'm not able to properly quantify and that I would like to, because it's really hard, right? I don't think you just getting hourly weather data, even if it says wind 13, gusting 22, you don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of 13 gusting to 22s. It could be very different, I guess. And also wind. This I can't figure out more, but wind obviously is going to affect different courses in different ways, depending on, how open, like links courses are. I think everybody knows wind has a massive impact on links courses. So, but in terms of, are there good wind players? I'm sure there are. I've not found a lot of predictive value to that, though. Again, it's the kind of thing that's not going to move the needle more than like a few hundredths of a stroke per round, at least using the data I have. So does that mean that there aren't good wind players and bad wind players? No, it just means that I'm not, with what I have, able to really key in on it that well. I know the narratives, like Shane Lowry and Alex Noren,
or the Texas guys that David mentions every Texas event.
Amen.
I think, part of it might be the fact that there's different kinds of wind, right? And if you're just saying, oh, how did this guy do in windy rounds? Like, well, a 15 mile an hour wind in, I don't know, what's a good example? Like
Augusta's different than in Texas.
For sure. Florida, and it's going to be different in Florida versus like Ohio. It's probably going to matter less on a hilly course with a lot of trees than,
Yeah.
It feels like it's just really qualitative again. It's kind of like preferring a certain green surface over another. It's like there's some guys you may hear, that love playing in the wind, or they're comfortable playing in the wind, or they grew up playing in the wind and they know how to, they prefer it windy because they feel like they have an edge on everybody else. Like, you either know that about a guy or maybe you don't.
I love playing in the wind personally.
Yeah, see, and I hate it. Like, and I'm an Augusta guy. We don't have wind, so it starts. I'm going to Scotland in a couple of weeks. I'm gonna be like, so I would be opposite, and that's just qualitative. Like, I don't know how I could really measure that. I might be good in the wind. Who knows? We'll find out in a couple of weeks.
I love the creativity of it.
Yeah, I do I like being creative on the golf course. Usually, my creativity comes from having to punch out somewhere.
Yes, that's the best part of my game. My recovery shots.
Yeah.
I can hook it around a tree or hit the little punch cut. Like, I swear, sometimes I'm better on those than in the middle of the fairway.
Spirit of Bubba or Spieth just gets in your body for a second. You pull off a very artistic shot. I love it. All right, golf addicts, before we get back to the Rufus Peabody interview, I want to take a quick second and thank our sponsors, Front Nine Coffee. Front9coffee.com is where you need to go to get all of the delicious goodness, the coffee for golfers, okay? Small artisan batch coffee that is not even roasted yet. It's going to get roasted when you order it, so it's very fresh. You can pick whether you want whole bean, coarse grind, fine grind. They're going to roast it the next day, and they're going to ship it to you anywhere in the U.S. or Canada within the next 2 days, so you get fresh coffee delivered to your door. For golfers, by golfers, it's Front Nine Coffee. So go to Front9, that's FORNT, the number 9, coffee.com, and use promo code TJ10 to get 10% off your entire order. Now, this is delicious coffee, okay? This isn't the cheap stuff that's been sitting on the grocery store shelves, getting gassy and nasty, okay? And they're longtime supporters of the Tour Junkies podcast, so show them some love. If you love us, give Front Nine Coffee some love today. All right, let's get back to the interview with Rufus Peabody. That's what I was going to ask. Is like, so what are you telling the beginner who's logging on to Data Golf? Like, where can they pay a little extra attention in terms of stats that they're able to get on Data Golf?
Data Golf talks I wish they weren't so open about some of the stuff that they talk about, but I wish they didn't give out so much information, but they they have stuff on course fit, course history. You can't I guess you can build your own model there, but you have to put in your own numbers. You can't. There's no average out of rankings and stuff like that. So I don't know. I would say this: if you're not building a model, that's been my approach is basically I'm trying to make true odds and then bet differences between my odds and what's available. That's one way of doing it. I think the other way, if you're not doing that, is sort of looking for an angle. it's saying that I don't think the market is accounting for this as much as it should. I don't know what the right price is, but I think that this is not being properly accounted for.
Gotcha.
So, and I think a lot of these narrative type things, like the win player stuff, if the market isn't accounting for that, if people like me can't find an effect and you think that there is an effect, you know, you don't have to know what the effect is. You just need to be directionally correct.
Right. Yep. That's a good point.
And I do think having resources like the data golf, it like can help in terms of giving you these sort of ideas, I guess,
Yeah. I know something I struggle with a lot, specifically at majors and big events is how to handle guys that play a limited schedule or don't play a ton, i.e. like Webb Simpson only plays like 17, 18 events every year. Brooks, who generally plays a limited schedule, Tiger, perfect example, how I guess what's the best approach for evaluating those guys on a week-to-week basis when they have such big gaps in their playing schedule?
I'm just gonna close my mouth on this one. I do think that it's a challenge, but I think it's something that I do pretty well. And I don't know.
Hey, listen, guys.
Use the data you have, right?
So you made money off Webb last week, is what you're saying.
It's like
I did. I think, yeah.
It's like, listen, guys. Rufus is you're not a tout, okay? You're not a guy who's you're doing this professionally for a living. So I should have said that up front. Like, you're not going to give away all the secrets.
Well, I feel like I've already said way too much.
and I'm sure there are people like in their car listening to this are just screaming at us, going, "DB, ask this question." And I know that if I ask the question, he's not going to answer it. So it's okay. Like we're very grateful for what Rufus has already divulged here.
My problem is I typically say too much. But
okay. What about form? Like, we haven't really talked about incoming form, recent form, long term form. Like, how do you define those things? How do you approach weighting those things? I tend to look at certain. I tend to look at certain things, certain stats. If I'm going to look at them, I'm going to look at them only in long term, ranges, like a lot of putting stats. If I were going to look at proximity numbers, I would only look at it in large, long-term looks. Do you agree with things like that, or how do you look at form? I guess overall.
So I don't really define it as short or long-term because I guess for each stat I kind of have my own sort of weighting as it goes back in terms of like, okay, last week it's a weight of 1. The week before that's a weight of 0.7. The week before that's a weight of 0.5. Right? I mean, I found the sort of shape and rate of decay that sort of optimizes predictive power.
Yep.
So So I think basically when people say, oh, I look at last 10 rounds for this or last 20 rounds for this stat or whatever, right? I mean, I think that's that's their way of decaying and saying, oh, I'm going to look at last 10 more than I'm going to look at last 100 for this particular stat. That you're saying, okay, well, last 10 like matters more. I mean, it's a steeper drop off, but
it seems like
I don't think about it as like long-term, short-term now.
Gotcha.
It seems like most of the literature I've read over the years from mostly smart people that I've read tend to weigh long-term much heavier than short-term. And I think most beginner bettors and beginner DFS players do it the exact reverse. They'll super weight recent form and almost don't even touch long-term form or however you want to define that.
Yeah. I mean, let's say you had, here's an example. Let's say you have two golfers that are both have the same short-term and long-term. Actually, let's say they have the same like form over the last like 2-3 years. They're the same age. One of the guys, let's say they're both like 37-year-old guys. Like one of the guys is a former major champion and was a top 10 in the world player in the past. I mean, actually, like Ricky Fowler, except if he had won a major. And another guy's like, someone who's been sort of a journeyman, and he's kind of he made it to the PGA Tour and's had a run where he's playing decent for a little while. Who would you expect to be better going forward?
The guy that was good previously.
Yeah, I agree with that. So,
in your experience, have you found that books are much more likely to price up a player in markets that has been playing well recently versus an elite player? Like the specific example I'm thinking of is like Jordan Spieth in 2018, 2019, even some in 2020, where a lot of books were still pricing him at an elite level when he was clearly nowhere near that. And it seemed like it took a lot of them a long time to adjust him down, but then kind of once he found it again, it seemed like within 2 to 3 weeks he was priced right back up to where he had always been.
So this is for outright markets, I assume you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, the thing with outright markets is they're one way, or they're one-way markets. You can bet on Spieth, but you can't bet against Spieth unless you want to bet every other player, in which case you're already guaranteeing yourself a lot because the 40% hold, right? So like it's like Tiger went off at 20-1 at some places last week. I literally made his odds like 1,050-1 to win. So, but it's in a way it's like supply and demand. Books know that a lot of people are going to bet on these big name guys. They're going to bet on Spieth. They're going to bet on Tiger, and so they are pricing it to sort of control their liability, and they know that they can price gouge you on that because so.
Yep.
So I think it's more a function of that. Like if you want to, and I don't think that phenomenon exists the same way in the matchup market. Any market where you can bet against a guy too, you're not really going to see that.
Gotcha.
I was going to ask you on the matchup thing. Is there a sports book out there that you find, like when they release their head-to-head lines, you tend to feel like you're in way closer agreement with that book than other books? In other words, like you're looking at it going, damn, I can't find enough matchups here that I want to exploit because I feel like this book gets it right according to your model and your brain more so than others.
I mean, I would say BetChris is going to be the best, probably, in my opinion. Their numbers are definitely closest to mine.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about majors real quick. Then we're going to bring this to a close. Before I do that, though, I do want to give you an opportunity to, and I know you said earlier you're not a great elevator pitch guy, but you've got the Bet the Process podcast that people can listen to. You guys do that pretty frequently. So
most weeks.
They can check that out. Yep. And that's all sports. It's not necessarily golf all the time, but yeah.
We also do these sort of high stakes Calcuttas for every major. And we've done it for like NBA playoffs, NCAA tournament, NFL playoffs, but we do it for every single major and for the players this year. And I mean, hell, the pot for the PGA one was over $1.25 million actually.
Whoa!
Wow. $1.25 million Rufus coin.
Yeah. Dude, that's sick. Me and Ben and Pat play
a stable coin.
We do, yeah. We do a Calcutta for majors every major. We've done pretty well in those. That's awesome.
Calcuttas are so much fun.
They're a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, they're great.
Yeah.
What that'll be a different podcast. We'll do a Calcutta only show. But before we get into like major stuff, you got about the process. You've just kind of started Unabated, I think. And I don't see any golf tools on there. There may not be any golf tools on there because you don't want to.
No, there aren't. Not at the moment. I mean, the thing is, like, I don't think I think we'll have golf odds at some point for sure, an odd screen, but I think that anything that we would do, like Data Golf probably already has that tool and does it really well. And so, what Unabated is I think actually you had a much better elevator pitch for it than I'm going to have, but it is tools for sports bettors. We have an odd screen. We have a community. We help you find. Well, we're not giving you the answers as much as we're giving you tools to find the answers, I guess is a good way of putting it. But
yep. And you got a lot of good calculators on there for people to do some research on. I saw that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I actually debuted a hedge betting calculator just on Wednesday morning. I think we launched it after this whole Mito Pereira thing, and this discussion had sparked on Twitter about whether I should have hedged my bet or not.
Yeah.
And so I actually did the math. I actually had to literally Google how do you differentiate logarithms. I had to relearn some calculus for it. But it's you can put in your bankroll how much you stand to win if your bet hits, and what the probability of that bet hitting is, which you can find from markets and stuff like that, and then what price you could get on a hedge, and it'll give you what your optimal amount to hedge is. So I personally think it's really cool, and I didn't realize that hedging. I didn't realize that negative EV hedges were optimal in as many cases as they actually are. I feel like I was kind of raw because I'm always like, nah, you know what? I can eat the variance. I'm okay. I just want to, but for example, even if I had let's say I had a $2 million bankroll, and my bets on Pereira, I had $1,000 to win $300,000. And I made Pereira 41.5% to win going into the final round, which is plus 141. If I could have gotten minus 150 against Pereira, like sort of a yes/no bet, optimally, I would have wagered over 100,000 on that, even though it's a negative 2.5% edge. So, I mean, that to me, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. I was like, I wouldn't have thought that would have been the optimal thing to do. But
wow,
the point here is that so this is, it's not to get too nerdy here, but as a bettor, you shouldn't be maximizing your expected value. You should be maximizing your expected bankroll growth. So it's like if I told you, I would give you JT at 1,000 to 1 to win the U.S. Open, you would clearly take that bet.
Right.
How much would you bet though? Would you mortgage your house for that? Like, you wouldn't bet everything right. But the less you bet, the more you lose when you win.
Yeah.
As my friend Zach says. The more you bet, the higher your expected profit's going to be, but at the same time, the more likely you go busto overall. Yeah. So that is basically what the hedging calculator is able to quantify. And that's because it's basically saying, if you want to maximize your wealth from betting, this is what your optimal hedge is.
We'll put a link.
Sorry for the nerdiness.
I love it. We'll put a link in the description to Unabated if people want to check that out. It does seem like it's got some great tools for other sports right now. But
we have some cool live in-game tools too. Okay. So you can essentially I think that there's a lot of arbitrage opportunities and that kind of thing available if you're in-game betting. Right now it's not in season, but football, basketball, and so knowing the value of, but it's hard to know. One book might offer minus 7.5, another might have minus 6. The stoppage in play, how much is that 1.5 point worth, right? And so we have tools basically that integrate with an odds screen that basically see to identify how much sort of those differences are, and to pinpoint where you can get value live betting.
That's sick. Anything else you got? Anything else you want to pump or promote there, Rufus, before we move on?
We have a cool NFL simulator too. You can simulate the entire regular season. Integrates with the odds screen, so you can see how your simulations show value at books if you're betting futures. But again, I need work on my elevator pitch. It's very disjointed. It's
you need to you just need to record it, like have a video produced for it, and then we can just play the video in the middle of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about individual products, basically. I'm not good at unifying them into this elevator pitch.
So I want to.
I love the products, though.
I want to talk about majors real quick.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna throw like some real quick firing ones at you, and then we'll wrap it up. Does the process? I doubt it does. I'm sure the process probably doesn't change for the majors. If so, how does it? Do you research it any different? And in terms of especially outrights, I'm interested. There's a lot of discussion that sometimes goes around on like when you should be firing on some of these outright numbers. Trying to predict how the line's going to move the closer we get to it. What have you found in that? Talk to me about majors.
So I do treat majors differently. I think that you kind of have to. They are they're different. I mean, if I'm not going to have Brooks Koepka handicap the same as I would a regular event because he actually cares and is going to practice for this one for it.
Strokes
So,
gained gives a shit, right?
right. Actually, one thing I really want to quantify someday is strokes gained tilt.
Mm.
I'm convinced that has some impact on majors that I'm not able to capture. That like, when Tyrrell Hatton just goes off,
Yes.
like throws his club and is just like done for the round, and it's like when you hit a good shot and it's not rewarded, and you get a bad outcome. Which golfers are able to handle that adversity? I feel like there is, and so I mean, some golfers are clearly better in majors than others relative to their sort of normal. And I think a lot of that may be the fact that some golfers are just not able to handle that. Like, what was the Jack Nicklaus quote that like he knows that half the field's already lost before they even tee it up? So I do more prep work for majors too, just because simply I'm able to get so much more down. So there's a lot on the line.
Yeah.
In terms of, I don't actually bet anything on majors before major weeks typically, just because in my process, I don't have it built out to do that. Like I have my, numbers for where golfers are now. And I guess I could do that. But the thing is, those are all situational based too. So, that's if like my number on JT right now isn't going to be, or my number on Rahm this week isn't going to be the same as it would be
the week of the Open.
Right, even if he doesn't play between now and then, right? Because he has got a layoff, and then we have to, it changes how things are weighted and things like that. So it is something, that I do think there are opportunities though if you're betting ahead of time, because I think books are oftentimes slow to update those lines. I mean, hell, you could just look at the leaderboard today or something. If someone who's a U.S. Open who's qualified for the U.S. Open. At long odds has been playing really well this week, and the odds haven't updated. I mean, like we're what, 3 weeks away.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff does matter. And I'm actually going to beat the Open this year.
At the Open Championship or the U.S. Open?
The U.S. Open. Yeah.
In Brookline, nice.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about the U.S. Open for just a few seconds here, or minutes. How do you attack a U.S. Open? Do you attack that one any different? Are you already starting your research? And specifically on Brookline, have you already started all that? And talk to us about your thoughts on the U.S. Open so far.
I have not started my research on Brookline yet. I have, we don't have a lot of data to go off of in the modern era. No. Mm-hmm. And where we actually would have good data, just because, what was the last big event? Was that the Ryder Cup there?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The with Sergio and everything. Yeah. David Duval. I remember seeing. I saw
99.
I watched some of it like a year ago, I think, on YouTube. It's
great looking shirts. Team shirts.
Seriously, the baggy pants style was at its peak then. But I think there's commonalities in U.S. Open courses, and I know it's evolved over the years. Back, it used to be sort of courses where, the courses that Graham McDowell was good at, right? Like basically you hit it in the fairway. If you miss the fairway, it's like a stroke penalty. You're punching out. And you had Chambers Bay and stuff like that, which kind of sort of changed things where the USGA decided to kind of go away from that sort of formula. But clearly they still are going to try to set it up to be a really, really hard course, that. And so I do think there's some commonalities. There's some differences too. And I think kind of the hard part's trying to find those and to figure out what it's going to reward and what it's going to penalize in terms of aspects of a golfer's game.
Well, would you agree that the harder or more penal a golf course is, the higher generally the variance in outcomes is going to be?
I think it's going to depend on what makes it hard. So if you have a lot more OB and penalty strokes coming into play, I think you're probably going to get more variance. But I think about something like Harding Park, where there's not a lot of, there's no water hazards really. I don't think there's one, right? It's guys are making a lot of bogeys, but there's not a lot. You're not seeing a lot of triple bogeys, or it's just it's hard in a sort of organic way without a ton of water, and so I think that's gonna I think that's probably gonna have different variance profile than a course in Florida, like I don't know.
PGA National.
Yeah, that's my first thought with all the water.
Yeah.
But are you talking about variance around a player's projection, or are you talking about how much? I mean, because there's that, and then there's the fact, like, how much does a course reward skill? Like, how random is it? How much is it we know how John Rahm feels about putting contests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would just it makes intuitive sense to me that the easier a course is, the tighter a player's distribution would be for expected outcome versus, like a PGA National where, a shot that is, a foot short of where it's supposed to land, could have been exactly where they were aiming, but Augusta wind kicks it now. They're making a triple bogey and they hit the shot just like they wanted to hit it.
I've never thought about it that way, actually, but I mean, if you think about it more globally with like amateurs, the variance for like a guy that, an 18 handicap is probably going to be a lot higher per round, right? So yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. I haven't actually looked at it that way. I have like I have a predicted course variance for each course based on what it's been in the past, but I could look at that and see, actually.
Gotcha. So something to put on the testing to-do list.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Cool.
Safe to say, with the U.S. Opens in general, like, it sounds like you're thinking in terms of looking back at maybe previous performance that a player may have at some of these more recent U.S. Opens and the setups there, starting around that Chambers Bay time. Maybe you could even throw in a course like Kiowa last year. It felt like that kind of played similar to a U.S. Open. So it sounds like you're saying, like, looking back at past performances there could be worth maybe more so than a typical week on tour, just looking at regular course history. Would you agree with that, or is that not what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. And I think in general, I mean, I think majors in general more than necessarily just U.S. Opens, just because I think there is something about the major pressure.
Yep.
But in terms of course fit, that's without having data on the course, that is kind of where finding previous opens or courses, like you said, that it seemed to have similar setups. I'm not going to say like course correlation, or being like, okay, we don't have any course history. Let's look at these courses that I think are similar and see what that course fit is. And I mean, I'll say there's a lot more art to majors than a normal week, just because you are dealing with, you have less data to work with typically. I mean, you have a lot of courses that are not, played year in and year out. I mean, except for, Augusta is the one that is, but, and so it's, I don't know. Yeah. There's certainly more art, and you're trying to sort of find things in different ways because you don't have the data in front of you, which can create opportunities though, because, you have to look at things in sort of unique, creative ways.
Love that. All right. So Rufus, I want to hit some quick questions here, and then we'll let you go. We appreciate you doing this. So, and Ben, you can fire off some of these off the top of your brain too, if you think about them. I do want to ask you about prize picks and like prop stuff. Have you played any of that? Have you started looking at any of that in terms of those new kind of players that have come into the market and give you opportunities? I don't know how open they would be to taking some of the size bets that you'd be willing to make on them, but have you looked at any of those prop situations or in terms of golf?
I personally haven't. I know people that, I know my friend Peter, Jenny's, who I think he talks about that kind of stuff, but I've never done anything with it. No.
Gotcha. All right. So give me a couple of golfers that you're very bullish on in general. Like and not, obviously not like John Rahm, but like, who are some guys that you just feel like are going the right direction? Like, you're bullish on them, and then give me a couple that you're pretty cold on, kind of bearish on.
So I guess I can tell you some guys I bet on a lot over the last year or so. I'm more jaded about them than anything, though. I'm just like, God damn it, I have to bet them again. Like Patrick Rogers is an example.
Oh,
Mhm.
fuck that guy.
Yeah, I feel the same way about him. EVR, although EVR did hit did bink one for me.
Did he?
It was the Reno Tahoe, I think, right?
Mhm.
I've never really. He's one I've never really fired on. Okay, this is fun.
I feel like yeah. You know, I thought about posting that ticket last week and saying, well, that hurts. EVR 225 to 1.
David's guy for a long time was Luke List, and I think even after David successfully hit Luke List, I think he's still down overall on him. But
Yeah.
He's been a popular one.
Like, over the years, I feel like I've bet on so many guys that are really good at getting second place, like Jim Furyk, Sergio Garcia. So yeah, Rogers, EVR. I don't know. Like, I mean, it feels like for outrights every week and top X stuff, it's a lot of these sort of under the radar guys that are, yeah. I will say this though. I mean, it feels like I go through phases. Like I used to be always betting against Patrick Reed. I never had bet on Patrick Reed until like middle of last year. I was betting on Patrick Reed. I bet on Patrick Reed, I think last week for something. I mean, I bet it, so it feels like there's sort of, like I'm on Rahm. I've been on Rahm a lot the last few years, but before that, I was actually, I remember betting against him his first major. Or was it his first major? It was, I forget, it was a US Open. I still remember he was like 4 over halfway through the first round. I don't know what major it was, but I was watching and being very happy about that. So I mean, guys that I'm against, a lot are probably going to be, I don't know. I feel like there's less of a pattern than there used to be for me. Like I bet on Spieth this week. I mean, not to win, but I have him. I'm in a matchup against Scheffler, actually. Although, again, it's price dependent, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Spieth's a better golfer than Scheffler.
It's
so
really,
I don't know who I'm against. Like,
this is how I know that I am a lot dumber than Rufus, because Rufus is so smart and he's got all this data that is keeping him from saying names, whereas I have all this just pain and heartache and hurt and like just qualitative feelings about these guys that I can rattle off a slew of these guys. But Rufus doesn't.
I have lots of qualitative feelings about guys. Believe me.
What do you think about Siwoo Kim? Give me your take on Siwoo Kim.
Oh God, I bet on that guy. It seems like, I feel like he's a guy I used to always be to bet against, and now I've been betting on him a lot lately.
Yeah,
and I'm sure I'll bet against him at some point too, if depending on where he goes. It's like with some of these guys, if you either I'm right or the market's right, and eventually the market will come to me, or I'll go back to the market. Mm-hmm. But Siwoo Kim definitely has high strokes gained tilt or strokes lost tilt.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, he does.
He is that guy looks like he's never smiled in his life. He's frustrating to watch, like, because he's a great approach player, huh?
Rufus, he has smiled at me twice this year.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got him to smile at me twice. And he gave me
that's probably more than his girlfriend or wife.
Yeah.
Praise God.
Big Siwoo guy here. What about
I'm a Siwoo guy too. So he just hasn't. He's cost me money. I mean, it's been like outright markets basically.
Yeah, same.
So much talent.
Who's your favorite Twitter follow? It can be out of anything. Just name some good Twitter follows you like.
Some good Twitter. I mean,
you don't follow us. You can't say that, but hopefully after this.
Well, I'm going to follow you after this for sure.
Okay.
I think it depends. It depends on what you're looking for, right? I mean, in the sports betting world, like I think Captain Jack is fantastic. I think the most boring follow in the world is Peter Jennings. Don't follow that guy.
But his wife is probably.
His wife is. Oh God, her. Yeah.
Very
I'm actually going to be. I'm heading to Colorado tomorrow. I'm going to hopefully get around in with him. But nice. Yeah, his wife's Twitter is fire.
She's a legend. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She should have married somebody way cooler than Peter Jennings.
Seriously.
Do you listen to any podcasts or watch any other like content on YouTube? I'm sure you probably don't or have time, but
Believe it or not, I used to, but the last few years I consume very little sports betting content or you know, uh, when I listen to podcasts now, it's generally non-sports stuff.
yep,
I just want to, get away from it for a little bit.
yep, I get that.
What about
would
you guys?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not
Look at my
sports
list.
betting related, mine's usually anything with Theo Vaughn. He makes me laugh. He's a comedian, so I do that.
Nice.
Ben probably listens to stuff that makes him smarter, makes him make more money. I don't do that. I just listen to people make me
I did hear you say "fooled by randomness." Nassim Taleb, all of his books. I think I've read all of them at least 6 or 7 times. I think I'm on like number 15 of listening to the Black Swan. I'm the same as you. Like I'm not a big sports consumer. If I'm listening to books or podcasts, like I like Tim Ferriss a lot. Um, I know if you're looking for a good like golf performance book, Be a Player. I've really enjoyed that one and listened to it multiple times. It's a good like mental model for how to not have strokes gain tilt or lack thereof. Um, I've read When Money Dies a couple times recently by Adam Ferguson. Um, like all of Malcolm Gladwell stuff. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
All right, that's enough.
Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke was a great one.
This guy is very smart.
This is not about you.
Read to let 6 or 7 times each. Damn, I've read them once, but that's impressive.
I mean, it takes multiple times of reading them to like really comprehend and wrap your mind around what he is conveying to you, because it's a lot of the stuff. The first time I read it was the exact opposite of the way that I approached trading and looking at financial markets and things like that. So it's probably been the most impactful book of my life.
That's awesome. I need to go back and read it again, I think.
Rufus, do you read any like transcripts from player interviews, or if you see a player get interviewed on a show somewhere, do you ever listen to those to try to pick up on anything from the player himself?
I don't that much. I mean, if someone brings something to my attention, I think my brother does a little more of that than I do.
Gotcha.
But
okay. I like this question. If I could genuinely come to you and say, hey, you can play Augusta National. You have to make an offer of how much you're willing to pay Augusta National to let you play, and you get one offer, and they're either going to accept it, and if they accept it, you have to pay it, or they're going to reject it. What's your offer?
That's a really good question, actually. I think it depends on how my betting's been going lately, probably. Am I getting what time of year am I getting to play it?
You pick whatever time you want. Having caddied there, I would say the weekend before is a pretty good time to play. Or no, I guess the weekend.
But they have the women's
thing,
yeah.
Before everything gets going for the women's am, that would be a pretty good time to play it. So I'd say that it's gonna be hot, but
yeah, usually October, November would be ideal. I mean, it's not going to be as pretty, obviously.
No.
You want the prettiness. You want that experience.
Yeah.
And you want the course in as much tournament condition as possible. So that's the time to play it.
Okay, I'm kind of cheap and I enjoy golfing anywhere. So like it doesn't matter how nice the course is. I'm gonna have a great time anyway. So I'm gonna say 20,000.
Okay. All right.
I'm not gonna go super high.
Reasonable. Interesting. Okay. Listen, Rufus, I appreciate it, man. This has been great. It's been fun talking to you. You're a cool guy and a smart guy. Obviously, we thank you for spending some time with us, making us hopefully better golf bettors, or thinking through our process a little differently, maybe. But everybody should follow Rufus on Twitter and check out the Bet the Process podcast as well, and go check out Unabated. And Rufus, we'll be tracking you, man, and pulling for you next time. Hopefully, we can both sweat a big Siwoo Kim ticket together one day. That could be fun. That'd be great. But we appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the Tour Junkies podcast. I got to remind you guys that the Nut Hut Discord server is where you can get VIP access to me, to Pat, to Ben Little, to AC, the smartest prize picks guy I know. All right. And all the community that you could ever ask for is in that Discord server. We've had verified members win over $6 million in the Discord server since June of 2020. There's over 700 members in there right now, and it's $10 a month or $90 a year to get in it. Okay. There is a free version if you're already on Discord, or if you want to set up your account and just check it out to see what it's all about. You can click in the description below and try the free version, but there's a lot of things hidden for you in the free version, like caddy info that we get from our friends on the course every single week that we pass along to you. I read every single interview and press transcript leading up to each golf tournament. I screenshot the stuff that you only need to know for betting or DFS, and I put that in the caddy info channel, curate all that information so you don't have to. Our friend Caddy John, former PJ Tour caddy, is on there every single week giving his thoughts, his breakdown on the golf course, and all the other stuff that you need. And the community is there. And listen, while there's a ton of golf information, we know that people love to bet and play DFS on other sports. So there's NBA threads, MLB, NFL, UFC. There's even a disc golf guru in there, right? Helping people make a ton of money, and it's just been a growing community. It's the best part of what we do. We don't charge our listeners, our followers, our readers, our email subs anything for the content that we put out at tourjunkies.com. We usually put it all to the sponsors and advertisers. Everything we write on our website, none of it's behind a paywall. Our emails are obviously free. The only thing that you pay for directly to get access to with Tour Junkies is the Discord server, and it's the Nut Hut. So go to tourjunkies.com, click on Nut Hut, check it out. $10 a month, $90 a year. You can cancel at any time, and just give it a shot. I promise you, you won't regret it. It's also the one place that you can get on Wednesday nights at around 8:30, 9 p.m. Eastern for at least an hour, two, sometimes three. You get live chats with me, with Pat, with some other experts that we have on there weekly. That's where we can answer all your questions about whatever you're playing, whatever you're doing, whatever you're thinking in terms of golf betting and DFS, or sometimes we just chat about life in general. So it's a great community growing on Discord right now. And I know it could be intimidating if you've never done Discord, but trust me, it's easy once you get in there and get going. So check it out right now. Link in the description. And now back to the show.